we have peace toward Elohim through our Kurios in the Greek, our master, Yahusha the Messiah. And I really want us to drill into the Kurios, and I don't often use the Strong's numbers, but the Greek Strong's number here is 2962, and the Hebrew number here is 3068 for Kurios. Kurios is found and has its beginnings in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And what do we find that Kurios is attributed to? None other than the divine name, the Yod, He, Wah, He. That is what Kurios is attributed to. Yet here we see Paul deliberately attributing the divine name to who? Yahusha. And this is something that the Jehovah's Witnesses just bypassed. But the text is so powerful when we really look at it. Kurios. And where would we find, I love delving in and finding the origins of these words, where would we find in the Septuagint the Kurios? Genesis, none other than Genesis, Bereshit chapter 15, verse 8. At the covenant blood ratification, we find the Kurios. We find the Kurios. And then where else would we find the Kurios? The divine name that is now, Paul is now taking us back to it, and he is now attributing it to Yahusha, and he is now going to talk about salvation. So we've got to understand that he is a master scholar. He is not just using words just for fun, but he is hoping that you and I, as students of the Word, will go and find where these words are, what the context of the surrounding verses is about, and how it can then be brought forth into our text of salvation, soteriology with Yahusha. So let's look at the Kurios. Genesis chapter 15, verse 8. It is intimately involved, the divine name and the cutting of the blood covenant that was given to Abraham. Next, you go to Exodus chapter 32, verse 11, and you'll find the Kurios at the golden calf covenant breach. So you've got the two opposing texts here of the Kurios. You find it in Genesis chapter 15, verse 8, where it is written, Kurios Yahweh, or Lord Yahweh Elohim, how shall I know, Abraham says, how shall I know that I will inherit your promises? Well, then Yahweh responds that you will now flay open the pieces. So this is now connected to the Melchizedek covenants of promise. And now we're going to find the Kurios in Exodus chapter 32, verse 11. This is, of course, the golden calf. And Moses brought the Lord, all caps there, the Hebrew word there is the word we see, the Yod, He, Wah, He, or in the Greek, the Kurios. This is Hebrews word 3068 in the Strong's Dictionary, right here. And Moses besought the Kurios, Yahweh, his Elohim, and said, Kurios, Yahweh, Elohim, why doth thy wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why do you think Paul in Romans chapter 5, talking about the benefits of Yahusha, that he brings forth salvation, that he would use a word that in the Septuagint is actually connected to the ratification of the covenant and then the breaking of the covenant subsequently? Because is Yahusha the restorer of the breach? Is he talking about restoring us to salvation, that which was promised, which was then subsequently broken and is now being restored with Yahusha? Promised Kurios, broken Kurios, restored Kurios, and he links it all back. Do you understand what I'm communicating? Because this is what Paul's communicating. He didn't just stick in Kurios because it doesn't mean anything. This is huge. Even Christian scholars understand the significance of the Septuagint rendered Kurios of the divine name being used by Paul. Jehovah's Witnesses are off doing their cultic dance, and they will deny that Yahusha is Yahweh manifest in the flesh, when Paul has deliberately put in the text guarding Yahweh's people from the cultic and heathen cults out there. Do you understand? It's very important. It's really what I like to call the triad naming formula. What do I mean? It's a combination of the names Lord, Yahusha, and Messiah. Lord, Yahusha, Messiah. Kurios, Yahusha, Moshiach. It's the triad naming formula, and Paul puts it in the text, and wherever he puts it in the text, you want to go back in the Septuagint and find the corresponding texts, because it's going to reveal a whole bunch to you. Paul puts it in verse 21. He puts it in chapter 6, verse 23. He puts in the triad naming formula in chapter 8, verse 39. You can't but notice Paul's deliberate attempt to connect us back to the Tanakh's usage of the divine name, specifically in the Septuagint. It places squarely on Yahusha's shoulders the sovereign divine nature. To call him Kurios, a term that the Septuagint uses to identify Yahweh by the divine name, is to do what? Is to deliberately, intentionally, and willfully credit Yahusha as being Elohim with us, Yahweh Emmanuel.